Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, news of a vaccine has delighted many who are hoping for instant normality in 2021. Equally, some out there will be suspicious that we will be forced to continue to jump through hoops and have tech and apps monitor our every movement and provide evidence of that vaccine before buying a ticket from Ticketmaster or even flight tickets from Qantas. Of course, we don't know how this story is going to pan out, but what we do know is that technology is playing a huge role in the race to get a vaccine out there. But I wanted to zoom out a little bit and look beyond COVID and look at the bigger picture. And I recently discovered a company called BERG Health. And they appeared on my radar when I learned that they're leveraging AI and patient biology to accelerate drug discovery and development for oncology, neurology, and so many other rare diseases. But enough spoilers from me. So let's get today's guest on to find out more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Well, thank you, Neil, and thank you for having me on. I'm Ivan Narain. I'm a co-founder and CEO of BERG. So BERG is a Boston-based biology and AI company, and our core focus areas are on in oncology, CNS diseases, and some rare diseases. We have over the past few years advanced a late-stage pipeline in pancreatic cancer, in brain cancer, and we also have some early drugs that are coming along for second-generation cancer drugs.
And for people listening and hearing about you guys for the first time, BERG Health is a Boston local biotech that leverages AI to accelerate drug discovery and development for oncology, neurology, and rare diseases. But can you tell me a little bit more about the kind of problems that you set out to solve with BERG Health?
Yeah, no, Neil. So I think that, very early on in circa 2010, we built an R&D center in Boston on the predicates that we can combine data sciences, primarily templated on artificial intelligence, and patient-driven biology. So we saw an opportunity to really fuse data sciences and that intersect of biology and AI to really pose data-driven hypotheses. So putting one step in front of traditional drug development, such that the data that's derived from patient samples and the data that we're getting from electronic medical records are all put together in a way that is agnostic. So there's no hypotheses up front. There's no bias interjected into the process. And it really allows for more predictability and reproducibility, because I think one of the issues that our industry has been riddled with, I think that the learning curve is really increased over the past few years. But generally speaking, it takes about 12 to 14 years and approximately about $3.5 billion to get one drug from conception to market. And a lot of that is actually due to the trial and error and the iterations that are necessary in the biological validation, finding the right chemical match to a drug target, performing the right types of animal trials and clinical trials that if successful will result in one drug product getting to the market. Now that's a lot of money and that's a lot of time. And when you think about the unmet needs in drugs that are directed to rare cancers, to rare diseases, to childhood diseases, we look at the aging populations being inundated from an epidemiological perspective in Alzheimer's, in Parkinson's. Look, there's a lot of need, when you look at global patient populations. And I think that as a whole, the approach that BERG has taken is how can we get to these hypotheses much faster? How can we interject more precision and predictability in the process of the research so that we can arrive with more reproducibility. So what that does, it results in getting to these answers much faster. So we cut down on time, not having to iterate and not having to maybe use as many chemical approaches to potentially be successful, so that it cuts down on cost. And then thirdly, I think the biggest impact from a clinical development perspective is really fueling a precision medicine approach. And for the listeners out there, in its simplest form, the definition of precision medicine is really giving the right drug to the right patient at the right time at the right dose. And if we get that bit right as early as possible in the clinical development process, we are performing more efficient and strategic and definitive clinical trials, which allows for these drug products to be advanced through clinical development much faster. And finally, once they get approved in the market, we know exactly the patient populations who may have a better response. So we're not giving these drugs to individuals who they may not work on. And it really does serve the public health in a much more efficient manner. So writ large, the company really has pioneered and ushered a process that sits within that intersect of biology and AI to help drive more efficiency in the process.
It's incredibly cool what you're doing here. But I'm curious, can you tell me a little bit more about the company's history, including how BERG was the original pioneer integrating biology and artificial intelligence to fast-track drug development? Because it is a big topic at the moment, but it's something that you're no stranger to, is it?
So Neil, our history is one that I think it's been not unlike some of the great stories in history of innovation and development. Really came together in a very unique manner. I met Mitch Gray. So our founders are Mitch Gray, Carl Berg, and myself. We met in the late 2000s, let's say around 2005, and I was head of cutaneous oncology at the Miller School of Medicine in Miami. And Mitch and Carl were partners in certain business propositions, and they had an interest in building out a dermatology business unit. And I was based in cutaneous oncology. When we all met, we were all at points in our lives where we, from different angles, Carl is the co-visionary of Silicon Valley. He was one of the early folks to help build out, tremendous amounts of commercial real estate. And so coming at it from a lens of how can things be done a bit differently, in my clinical training and in my research training in Miami, I didn't really see as much of the translational potential of how the science was being translated immediately into clinical development, because the way that drugs are delivered to patients, namely in the United States and broader Europe, is by formulary. So whatever the NHS pays for, or whatever a big insurance company pays for, or Medicare, that's how we're going to treat a patient who is diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, for example. They're giving that a specific drug that's reimbursed. So we're not triaging and considering the differential biological profiles that patients have as a measure of how we treat them. So, together, coming at it from different angles, we thought, could we start a company that would do things in a different way? Could we, to not interject that initial bias, to not be subject to what we already know in biology, to not just do the Me Too research. And one of the things that I think that the hallmark principles that the company was built on is, let's do it in a hypothesis-free manner. Let's listen to the data. Let's allow the patient centricity to come through. And we do that by actually starting the process with tissue samples from patients from different populations, whether they have a given disease or they're otherwise healthy controls, or various ages or gender and ethnicity diversity. So we really want to find that narrative of the patient populations, and then use technology and biology to help us put forth hypotheses that are much more data-driven, much more patient-centric. So in late 2008, I moved up to Boston to start what is now our R&D operations. And the early years of the company, as you can imagine, Neil, this was a very different concept than today. Not many folks in the world were in tune to this type of research, and this was really, bucking a big trend. So early on, it was I wouldn't say it was a bed of roses for us. It was, I think, taken with much skepticism, and given the history of the company, none of us really came from a traditional hallmark or significant pharmaceutical development background. So, it's really, we came in with an outside view. We wanted to depend on and engender the patient-driven data. So this is a very unique history and a very unique story. But over the years, we were able to bring in some of the largest, most respected institutions in academia and government and industry as collaborators, because we believe in a model of really crowdsourcing innovation, crowdsourcing how we look at different things, bringing the right and the best minds on the most difficult problems at the inception of the research, not after things have been developed. So I don't, so some of the early years were pretty rocky. I don't know if I would change it, because I think it's made us stronger and it's made us better, and it's made us more sharpened towards how we look at different things. But this is not your traditional biotech, Neil. It was a much different story.
And for anybody that's listening that are outside the medical community and interested in the technology behind it and understanding a little bit more about the BERG model and the role of AI and patient biology to accelerate and transform drug discovery and development for oncology, neurology, and drug diseases and working drug pipelines, can I ask that you share a high-level overview of some of the successes that you've had too?
Yeah, sure. So, it's really three areas that we focus on. One is de novo drug development. Two is the development and the validation of disease-relevant biomarkers. So it helps us diagnose or follow or treat diseases in a much more efficient manner, do more efficient clinical trials. And then the other is to repurpose existing biomolecules or chemicals that really have shown or pose a promising therapeutic modality. So the first example I think is one of the hallmark examples is our relationship with the U.S. Department of Defense. In about 2014, they had come to us and said, "Look, I know you guys have developed this platform, interrogative biology, and you've been using AI and tissue samples to try to understand diseases much more fundamentally." And one of the issues in the military is that in the U.S. military is that there are higher rates of prostate cancer in the U.S. military than compared to our civilian population. But within the context of even that population, our pilots have about 4x the incidence of prostate cancer. So this is an issue. And in addition to that, African Americans have even a higher rate. So what we did is we were exposed to and collaborated with over 27,000 health records and tissue samples. What was really cool about this is it really created the first demonstration of the power of our platform, because across space and time, and by that I mean we had access to samples from the same patient before, after, during and after they got a cancer diagnosis and treatment. So we were able to longitudinally look at how the various genes and proteins and lipids were changed in that patient over time, and then map that, as you can imagine, from a population health perspective. So, we also got samples from that same patient that was non-cancerous. So then what we did is we did a multi-omics approach. So a multi-omics approach is to screen, all of the parts of the biology, genes and proteins and lipids, metabolites, etc., over and over again in various environments. And then all of that data is subjected to the AI system. And what the AI system does, Neil, is to build up certain maps on the global population of patients within the normal sample or the cancerous sample. But from all of this data, just a voluminous amount of data, we were able to not only, the ask was, can you help us fundamentally understand some unique biological drivers in prostate cancer and potentially look at biomarkers. But what was really gratifying from the BERG perspective from this relationship is that, one, it really showed how special it could be when government and innovative biotechs work together to do what's best on each side. Two, we were able to find certain biological features that spoke to what was different in the biology of patients with advanced, more aggressive forms of prostate cancer. So people who had a Gleason score over 8, et cetera. And then 3, we were actually able to clinically validate a number of biomarkers that separated out if an individual had benign prostate hypertrophy or an enlarged prostate, or did that patient indeed have prostate cancer. And we looked at the retrospective over 800 retrospective samples that we had from DOD, and then we actually did prospective clinical trials with the DOD and Harvard and Mount Sinai in Canada, Cleveland Clinic, et cetera. That was over a 1,500 patient sample, and we clinically validated that these markers were able to discriminate whether or not an individual had prostate cancer or BPH. And why that's so important is that the only way that one can definitively know today if an individual has prostate cancer is to do multiple biopsies. And biopsies pose risk with infection, with impotence. You have to sometimes do the active surveillance where you're taking multiple biopsies. So if a person can be exposed to getting a blood test compared to those multiple biopsies and not being exposed to the risk, putting less burden on the public health system from a cost perspective, I think that really is a shining example of, one, being able to find new biology, being able to discriminate the differences in that new biology between patient populations, and then creating a real product to come out of it. And I think that this is the first diagnostic product to ever be developed using AI. The second example I would give is our work on pancreatic cancer that we've done with Harvard Medical School and other centers, where there was actually a dual purpose mechanism of advancing one of our drugs, BPM 31510, which is a drug conjugate of ubidecrenone and phospholipids, which is really a recreation of the inner mitochondrial membrane. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So really, we're redelivering this in very high levels in an intravenous formulation to patients to treat advanced cancers. And this was a drug that is an existing biomolecule, but what we did is we ran the drug through some of the processes in the platform that I mentioned. So one, it helped us define the mechanism of action. How does the drug work? It helps us define which cancers we should focus on. Ironically enough, the platform suggested that the drug would work on more advanced and aggressive cancers. So, example, pancreatic cancer, triple negative breast cancer, brain cancer. And so we pivoted development into phase 2 trials based on the output from the platform. So that was a demonstration of how the technology can help guide the development of a drug, repurpose a drug. And then we have, follow-on examples that I can speak to in Parkinson's disease to look at Parkinson's biomarkers, biomarkers, the same process I just described for prostate cancer. We have some very, very exciting early data in pancreatic cancer that we're now in the validation process of. So where the company has really been able to show that this is a very diverse and adaptable platform that can either pivot in drug development or diagnostic development, but more importantly, writ large, helping to drive efficiency on how we could advance assets to understand patients more effectively, create products to help those patients, and commercialize those products with the right types of partners.
And another topic which is huge at the moment, as we both record this, with you being in the US and me in the UK, is the topic of a COVID vaccine. And I also believe that you're aiming to transform the overall approach to COVID drug development and beyond. But can you tell me more about that collaboration model that you've got and how it will help prepare for the next superbug, if one does occur, of course?
Yeah, so given everything I just mentioned on, what BERG's sweet spot is really helping to discriminate and define areas within the biology that have been affected or been dysregulated with a given disease. And COVID has really sensitized us to when things happen and go downhill from an infectious disease perspective, they happen very quickly. Case of COVID, we know that day 5 is that turn point where a patient is either going to recover and do well, or they may advance. And what we did is, the vaccine development, or I think we're all very excited for the world for the development of vaccines. But BERG's approach actually was a bit different. We thought that we would focus on therapeutics, because the therapeutics that we're focused on is looking at not only COVID-19, but potentially these types of viruses as a whole. We've partnered with Oxford and the Oak Ridge National Laboratories in the U.S. This partnership is just, it almost seems like a Star Wars type a partnership, but it's actually real. So it combines the country's fastest computer, the supercomputer, which is a Summit computer. It goes at the speed of 1 million laptops. 1 million laptops. Wow. It is able to screen 1.2 billion molecules in 9 to 12 hours. This is a process that if you went through kind of some traditional chemical scaffold and screening process, could be months. We're bringing months down to hours because of the speed of the computer. Then BERG is bringing the artificial intelligence algorithms and the screening of the biological samples. So it's really combining molecular biophysics. At Oak Ridge, they do molecular biophysics, where they actually look at docking studies. So basically, I use the Star Wars example because it's almost like looking at when the space shuttles, dock into the International Space Station. That's precisely what Oak Ridge is looking for something to dock into the binding site of the virus and interrupt that binding of the virus. So we know that COVID-19 binds to the ACE2, which is the angiotensin converting enzyme 2, which is located in these receptors. We have these receptors in our kidneys, in our lungs, in the gut, in the brain, primarily. So COVID loves to the bind. We know that it binds to ACE2. So we see things play out. This is why individuals who have a pre-existing hypertension or diabetes or impaired cardiovascular function, when in individuals who have higher copies of ACE2, this is our platform actually, from the model that was built and from some of the work that our Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Ranga Sarangarajan, focused on. He did some really, really neat work on ethnic populations. So you saw that African Americans, the BAME population, South Asians have higher numbers of ACE2. So obviously, if you have more copies of ACE2, it gives COVID-19 an opportunity to use that machinery to create more of a viral load. So more of the virus is going to be produced in individuals like that. So this is why it poses a higher risk. And then you combine that with pre-existing conditions, things can go downhill pretty quickly. So the work that's being done is doing these docking studies with the molecular biophysics from Oak Ridge, looking at some of the data and the resources that we have at Oxford, and then using our biology and AI models to combine supercomputing, the world's fastest computer, the world's most dynamic molecular biophysics, artificial intelligence, patient biology, to ask the question for this pandemic, how do we find drugs and therapeutics to halt the production of the viral load? Or for example, what Ranga found is people who were on ACE inhibitors were doing live studies now with big health systems to pose the question, the individuals who have these genetic predispositions, but they're on ACE inhibitors. So, ACE inhibitors are just a basic high blood pressure medication. Did those patients, when they contracted COVID, did they have a less severe case? Because right away, that tells us that if we can put individuals on low dose ACE inhibitors, it may prevent people from getting on the ventilators. So these therapeutic approaches are not going to stop folks from getting COVID, but it's going to take the fear away. It's going to take the severity away. So if we can make this like the common cold, when the next coronavirus comes along, or when the next type of respiratory virus comes along, we now have come up with a model to get ahead of these types of viruses much faster, so we can create the lockbox mechanisms to say, okay, you may infect the body, you may be able to get in, but you're not going to use the body's machinery to destroy, organ function and potentially lead to death. So that's what the approach is. So the approach is sensitized because of COVID-19 and amplified because we want to get ahead of the next pandemics to come.
And as this is a tech podcast, I'm also interested, how does integrating artificial intelligence into drug development change the game in a COVID world? Because it seems to be speeding everything up, but I'm really interested in your viewpoint on this.
So one I would say, Neil, is it's funny. The irony of it is that it brings people together.
Yeah.
Because it's not like all of us are running around as card-carrying data scientists. But what it does, it serves, at least BERG has used it as a new collaboration model to bring together big governments like, the U.S. government, Department of Energy, Department of Defense. We're working with Genomics England in the UK. Big universities, Oxford, Stanford, Harvard, et cetera. Drug companies. I mean, we see the collaborative efforts. What it's helping us to do is to bring minds together very quickly, irrespective of where they come from. So whether you're a government scientist, industry, academic, it doesn't matter. If you got a great idea and you have something constructive and valuable to bring to the conversation, then game on. Number two, it is allowing voluminous amounts of data to be analyzed in record time. So the AI being applied on supercomputers, being applied within the right ecosystem of, for example, we see this development of a massive hybrid cloud development, right? So from a tech perspective, we look at the Microsoft, hybrid cloud, the IBM approach. These big tech companies, are allowing global, international, cloud-based research to be fueled, where algorithms could be put on these, our BERG approach is using the best of all of this, right? So the world's fastest supercomputer, some of the best AI algorithms we have, the best, biology, the best teams around the world, use of hybrid cloud in the appropriate situations, combining big hospital systems, payer and providers, drug companies, great universities, great thought leaders around the world. AI is a gel that's bringing that all together. I don't think everyone, may not. What makes it beautiful is you don't have to be an AI guy. You don't have to be a data scientist to use data science. You just have to be aligned to the right type of mindset and collaborative model, so that your data that you may be producing as a physician or a doctor or a chemist can be exposed to and employed within these AI algorithms to get the solutions a lot faster. So it also allows you not to have to worry about every bit of the process. A chemist can continue to focus on his chemistry or her chemistry and allow the processes to be more streamlined, to be more integrated, to be more dynamic. So that's where I see, at least I can speak for the BERG experience, working from a global health perspective, that's where we've seen the biggest impact.
And do you have any examples or use case maybe that just help anyone listening understand what the next generation of precision medicine would look like?
Interesting. I mean, I guess two use cases would be, let's take a cancer drug.
Yeah.
So people who are diagnosed with a rare aggressive form of cancer like glioblastoma multiforme, a form of brain cancer that is very immediately debilitating on that patient and their family if one does not respond to frontline radiation or radiotherapy or temozolomide, things go downhill very quickly for those patients. If they fail radiation and TMZ plus Avastin, within 3 to 4 months, that the expectancy is not very very positive. So in a case like that, we need to know: do we give radiation to which patient as quickly as possible, or maybe it may be that for some patients giving temozolomide or giving like we have a drug in development that we're advancing to phase 2 that's led by Stanford and some other centers in the U.S. where we're using BPM 31510 combined, given to the patients first, then they get radiation and another drug. So really sensitizes these patients to radiation. But through doing these studies, we're able to find out which patient may be more responsive to giving our drug first, which patient may be responsive to giving the combination, so the radiotherapy and our drug. So that's an example of getting the right treatment to the patient like that as quickly as possible. Because if you don't get the best outcome as quickly as possible in that patient, the clock is ticking. So it is a very acute and the need to get the right answer in that patient population is much more acutely needed than, say, somebody who's got diabetes. This is a chronic disease. It takes years to develop. It can take even multiple more years for comorbidities like impaired wound healing or atherosclerosis or certain impaired wounds or on the skin, etc., to form. So the example of getting patients who are in need much faster. The other example is using algorithms and the biological triage processes for patients who get viruses or infections or bacterial infections. Giving the right antibiotic in its first instance at the front line as a frontline therapy when the patient goes to the GP or the urgent care center or the A&E center. The research has shown giving the right drug especially with infectious diseases may prevent septicemia, because once a patient is failing certain antibiotics and they get the septicemia, which is an infection of the blood, again things can go downhill very quickly. So it is about the faster we can get the best treatments to patients, we're preventing the trial and error processes and preventing what could be a very manageable problem up front from becoming potentially life-threatening process if it's not treated efficiently. And then I have to end on the other example of COVID. Giving the right vaccine. We have 3 promising vaccines from Pfizer, Moderna, and AZ. I know there are numerous other vaccines in development, but these 3 have advanced very quickly to potential imminent approval. There could be a scenario where the AZ vaccine may be better for someone than Moderna, or the Moderna vaccine may be better for a certain population. So finding that out as quickly as possible, especially in these next few months, is very important. And the same thing could be said on any potential COVID therapeutics. So this precision medicine approach is not to be taken lightly, especially in the cases of infectious diseases and pandemics, because it is literally can save lives faster or prevent a case that may be at a given time not as serious, prevent that from becoming life-threatening if not dealt with in the appropriate manner.
And a lot of your success will be determined by the partnerships that you have in place too. And before you came on the podcast, I did read about your most recent partnership news with Advent Health. Is that something you can expand on for anyone that missed that?
Yes, I'm happy to. So the Advent Health relationship. So Advent Health is the 9th largest U.S. healthcare system. Primarily, the folks that we have partnered with is one of the largest hospitals within the health system, which is the Advent Health System in Orlando. That is really interesting because the Florida community is very diverse. They're in age ranges, in the ethnic diversity, socioeconomic access. So it really is a nice microcosm of the U.S. population. The other thing is Advent Health is very forward thinking. So they have created biobanks. They have embraced data sciences. They have started to collect the type of information for real world evidence in ways that allow for companies like BERG to help analyze those data very quickly. So what Advent and BERG, we've been working together on metabolism and diabetes and age-related diseases for a few years. But Stephen Smith and Brett Goodpaster at Advent Health, we had a conversation about a month ago, and we said, look, how about if we combine a lot of the outcome data from the COVID population? You guys have tons of cases. We're now in the second wave. We can expose the types of health information and patient information that's IRB approved into the BERG algorithm, so we can see, hey, why did some patients who even have existing conditions and have, are African American and do have these mutations, why is it that these patients actually did okay than others who you would have expected to do better? So using these algorithms to say, what are some of the areas in the biology that allows these patients to have a better outcome? Or in the corollary, why are some folks just, they come in, everything seems fine, and then all of a sudden that day five flip where patients go downhill very quickly? Let's understand that. What, is this something unique in their immune system? Is there something in their vascular systems that is giving way to this bridge of this a transition? And helping to understand that very quickly can allow us to build up clinical decision support elements so that Advent Health can recognize these patients at T0. So when they come in, if they have these parameters in this age group, with this ethnicity, with this type of history, this patient needs to be triaged in a much different way so that Advent can get ahead of the treatment and maybe be a bit more aggressive with those patients. So maybe considering remdesivir earlier, considering dexamethasones, considering some of the other antibody Regeneron therapies or emerging therapies that are coming along much quicker than waiting for that patient to be advanced into the ICU. But using these data as a whole, it does pose a amazing global study for the rest of the world to say, okay, if this has worked and these treatment algorithms can be triaged as quickly, can we then superimpose those upon other parts of the United States and indeed the world? So the implications of the Advent relationship are immediate, they're global, and they're very, very exciting. And this is, I'm glad you asked me about Advent, because this is an example that actually exemplifies some of my prior points on getting the right people, the right mindset. Steve and Brett and Paul Cohen, they're about getting things done now. True collaborators, physicians and scientists who are executives who get it, who just want to move that needle as quickly as possible. Having the right type of data, being able to be collaborative, and being nimble in how you do some of the boring stuff like the contracting or the legal stuff. Being able to, because oftentimes that's what holds up these innovative partnerships, and being able to work through with their leaders quickly has helped us advance that relationship in a matter of only 30 to 45 days.
It is an incredibly exciting time for you, but we are on the verge of entering another year. So I've got to ask, what's next for BERG Health? Is there anything else you can share with us today?
Yeah, I think that taken together, the experience that the company has had in building a very unique and dynamic platform that is interrogative biology, helping us understand how we pivot certain inflection points along the supply chain of drug development. So discovering drugs faster with more precision, developing them across drug development profiles and chemical moieties with more precision, doing the better clinical trials. What's next for us is scalability. We need to be able to, we are very interested in global health, not only having the impact within smaller populations, but allowing our technologies to have, finding the certain biological trigger points that are going to affect larger populations, being able to work with payers and providers and governments and great academic institutions to create this new partnership model of crowdsourcing things in ways that allow us to all the stakeholders to get out of the outcome and the answers, what they're looking for, whether that's the immediate biological insights, treatment algorithms, drug development, the publications, greater policy initiatives, intellectual property, so that everybody gets what is pertinent and useful for their certain, the remit that within their respective institutions. But what is next absolutely is the scale and the impact of interrogative biology, perform the right types of partnerships with some of our late stage drugs so we can partner those with commercial entities in big pharma so that they can help commercialize that, because our sweet spot is really the technology and the combination of the technology and biology to drive these disease models and focus on the early bit of drug discovery and clinical development. So creating higher quality INDs, creating diagnostics that help drive those processes effectively, and really showing this, demonstrating impact on hospital systems and with governments, with partnering with drug companies so that we are populating more effective and precise drugs into clinical development and commercialization.
Fantastic. And I'm conscious we've covered a lot of ground in our conversation today. So for anyone listening that would like to continue to follow your story, find out more information, or even reach out and can contact a member of your team and continue this conversation we started today, what's the best way of doing that?
Well, certainly, I would say, start by looking at our website, which is www.berghealth.com. That's BERGHEALTH.com. So look us up on www.berghealth.com. And if you have any questions or just want to just reach out to the company, certainly just sending an email to info@berghealth.com. Everything's on the website, and just contacting us, through those mechanisms, or even just calling in, we'd be happy as always to address any incoming requests.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for joining me on the podcast today. I think before I came on and we had the interview, I knew that BERG Health leverages AI and patient biology to accelerate drug discovery and development. But there's a line that you said midway through the interview there where you said that it's not really about the technology, it's about bringing people together. And at the end of every episode, I always say that technology works best when it brings people together. So for those reasons alone, it's been an absolute pleasure to get you on the podcast today, and love to stay in touch with you and continue to follow your journey. But thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Neil. I on behalf of BERG, thank you so much for having us on and giving us the opportunity to talk about BERG. But I certainly agree with your final statement. It is all about people. all about people. And none of this can be done if you don't have the right mindset and the right folks and energy and collaboration. So, and I think if 2020 hasn't taught us anything, it is, the only way we can serve people is by joining.
I love learning more about BERG's model there and the role that AI and patient biology is playing in accelerating and transforming drug discovery. But over to you, because obviously I'm not a healthcare guy. I'd love to hear your questions, insights, experiences by simply emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website, of course, is techblogwriter.co.uk. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, about absolutely anything. One of the reasons I created this podcast was to give everybody a voice and a platform, so I do encourage you to use it. And if you want to come on here, I'll gladly invite you. Equally, if you'd just like to have a little chat with me offline, we can do that as well. But it's quitting time for me, so a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.